who worked in the education system for 14 years. There's 110,000 high schools in America. The majority of them are in New York, Florida, Texas, and California. Our reading and math scores are the worst in the G7 and the G20 in terms of how many dollars we spend to advance our children.
Okay.
Why? Unions. Unions that keep mediocre teachers in place in every high school in America when we should be firing them. You want to talk about whack as our theme tonight's show? I would like to fire teachers that don't... Wait. And I'd like to pay a lot more to the teachers that advance math and reading scores that push our system forward against every G7, G20 country. We have broken the system long ago through unions, and this is very unpopular.
But what are those cuts actually?
What it means is
the
lowest paid person in America that deserves a lot more money is a great teacher.
I agree.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel with your man Wise. We got to check out these clips here. I got two CNN clips. Kevin O'Leary, Scott Jennings just shuts down a panel of liberals. Not real hard to do, honestly. I got a couple clips to share with you guys. I'll give my context in the middle and at the end. Like, share, subscribe. If you'd like to go the extra mile, join the ARP family or buy your man a coffee. Link in the description box below. Let's get after it.
But what we did today was to take the first step of eliminating what I think is bureaucratic bloat. We wanted to make sure that we kept all of the right people, the good people, to make sure that the outward-facing programs, the grants, the appropriations that come from Congress, all of that are being met. And none of that's going to fall through.
One of the things people fail to understand is actually how our public schools in this country are funded. People don't understand that we have a three-legged stool in the way that we fund our schools. You have your local tax dollars, your federal tax dollars, and your state tax dollars. And so when you make drastic cuts to the federal government, we're talking about your title programs, we're talking about your lunch programs, we're talking about the programs that affect your kids who have extraordinary or special needs. We're talking about all of those things that are going to be affected by draconian cuts such as this. If we want to go in and say that, look, and I think all of us could agree around the table that we're not preparing our kids for a 21st century global economy. If we wanted to start from that premise, and sorry to use, I'm not picking on you, but to use your words instead of whack, 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 whack. If we wanted to start from that premise and figure out how we can better educate our children, there are ways to do it other than draconian cuts. And I think in places like Mississippi, places like Arkansas, places like the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, South Carolina, and North Carolina, they're going to fill these cuts a lot more.
May I respond?
Please. I mean, it's an open show.
As an individual who worked in the education system for 14 years, there's 110,000 high schools in America. The majority of them are in New York, Florida, Texas, and California. Our reading and math scores are the worst in the G7 and the G20 in terms of how many dollars we spend to advance our children.
Okay.
Why? Unions. Unions that keep mediocre teachers in place in every high school in America when we should be firing them. You want to talk about whack as our theme tonight's show? I would like to fire teachers that don't... Wait. And I'd like to pay a lot more to the teachers that advance math and reading scores that push our system forward against every G7, G20 country. We have broken the system long ago through unions, and this is very unpopular.
But what are those cuts actually?
What it means is
the
lowest paid person in America that deserves a lot more money is a great teacher.
I agree. As a former teacher.
And we can't, in the system of unions in America, we keep mediocrity festering, destroying the education of children.
Let me just tell you how misguided your statement is.
Not at all.
But I mean, I'm just going to point out.
That's the problem with unions in general, is that it doesn't reward the best people, and it keeps below average and average workers safe. That's the problem. And that's also the problem with the public school system in reference to unions. And what I mean by that is that they don't want to compete. They want more money, and we've given more money to these school systems, but the teachers don't want to compete. And I've heard it from teachers, and I've heard it with my own ears, that they feel like they shouldn't be responsible for a child not receiving a proper education, although it's their job to educate. And although there are some people out there who don't think that the number one job of a teacher is to educate, but I digress. Let's keep it going.
Thank goodness I'm here.
But you're wrong, and let me tell you why.
I'm 100% right.
No, I want to tell you why you're wrong. Because the bottom 10 states that are underperforming, those states that I'm talking about in the South, Let's take South Carolina, for example, or Mississippi. You want to tell me one thing they don't have? One thing they don't have: strong teacher unions. So there is no direct correlation.
They have weak teacher unions?
Or barely
But
any
they
at
have
all.
unions.
Yeah, but that's not the reason these places are failing.
So find
when was
me,
the last time?
if you look at 10 teachers, 4 of them are great. I want to double their salaries.
That's no question. I agree with you.
So why don't you just get rid of
Now, what
unions?
happens if you have a quarter of shame where kids go to school and their heating and air don't work, where their infrastructure is falling apart, where they have to drink unclean water, or they come
Send
to
the
school
money
hungry?
to the states. That's what Trump
How
is
does
doing.
that fix the problem I just laid out to you?
Well, you got to fix the unions first, because we both agree bad teachers destroy advancement of
So
children.
I just have a question. Are you saying that the cuts to the Department of Education that happens right now are going to impact the unions?
I would
'Cause don't
rather the
actually think-
dollars that are put into running
I know, but
the
you
federal
started
mandate.
talking about something else, but we're talking about the cuts to the Department of Education. I don't think those are directly.
No. You're cutting out the federal mandate
they're-
and giving it to the state.
They're cutting the bureaucracy.
Yes.
I don't think they're cutting the money. They want to send the money directly to the states.
That's
And
it.
Respectfully, if this bureaucracy that is in place now at the federal and state level, no matter what state you're talking about, we're doing such a bang-up job, we wouldn't have these terrible reading scores. We wouldn't have these terrible math and science scores. Something is broken, and there's one more issue that no one's talking about, and that is the issue of truancy. We've got 30+% truancy rates in some places. Not only can these kids not read, we cannot even find them. The bureaucracy
You know who
has
had a
failed.
program for that?
I would
Kamala Harris.
not disagree. Exactly. I would not disagree with either of you all on the fact that we are not preparing our children well enough.
But you want the
But-
state
but,
to
but that's
control
not.
this?
Absolutely not. And let me tell you why. I want there to be oversight. I don't necessarily want there to be a bloated bureaucracy, but what I do want is every child in this country to have an opportunity to succeed, regardless. And let me just tell you the biggest problem we have in this country, because you said unions. I will push back on you and say that the greatest problem we have is the fact that children are punished in this country because of the zip code that they're born into. And until you can find me some parity,
Different issue.
No, it's not.
Actually,
because
I
the
mean-
schools sit in those.
That's where school choice comes into play. And we know that Democrats are anti-school choice. And Lord, we know that the unions are anti-school choice because they don't want to compete for the students. Bakari's on to something there, but school choice should be available to every kid across the country. The money should follow the student, not just automatically go to the school that the student lives in or the district that the student lives in. The money should follow the students. The parents should have a say in what type of education their child gets. And he's absolutely right. Just because you live in a zip code that may be on the poorer side of things doesn't mean that you have to get a education that's less than. Let's keep it a buck. So if you open up school choice and allow the money to follow the students, that would help to solve the problem.
You can solve it with school choice.
Hang on a second, Kevin.
That's-
I mean,
the
I want
problem
you to
is that
address
every choice wouldn't be a-
what Bakari is saying. Okay, let's say that you get rid of the bureaucracy at the Department of Education. How do you ensure that kids are actually being educated and that they're not just being moved
Do you
out
think
of
at the state
No, no, no.
level they
No, no, no,
hate
I'm-
kids? They hate
and
children?
that they're not just being
You think at the
I didn't
federal
say that
level they hate kids?
That they're not just being moved out of the public school system because it's easier to move them out than to educate them.
The one thing about education you can't deny is the reading and math scores. Unfortunately, that is the metric by which we test.
But do you understand my question?
I get it,
That
but
if
it's
you
not
take the
dealing with
lowest
the issue.
performing kids and you just take them out of the system, guess what those reading and math scores are going to do? They're going to go up. So how do you prevent
For
schools
them
from
to
doing
go
that?
up, you need great teachers.
Well, I think there's also a concept of teaching to the test, which actually does.
Well, I think there's something else that's missing as well. You show me a place where the test scores and the reading levels and the math levels are bad. I'll show you a place where there's a bunch of single parent led households. That's the other issue that we have going on in this country. We have a lack of families. We also have people that are so busy chasing a bag that they could care less about their children's education. You have people working for things, not really concerned if their child is being educated properly. Those are major issues that we have going on in this country. And if people actually care, if they actually gave a darn, they would sacrifice that extra job, or they would sacrifice mom working, or dad working, although I'm not a proponent of stay-at-home dads, but whoever is the breadwinner, and then tighten the belt loop and say, you know what, until we get these children through school, somebody's got to be home to make sure that they can get the proper help and guidance that they need with this homework. Or I'm a huge proponent of homeschool. And if you have the ability to do so, but people will complain and say, we don't have enough money to homeschool, but that's because y'all feel like y'all got to have the best of the best of the best of everything. And when you do that, something else has to be sacrificed. And typically it's your children's education.
Doesn't create critical thinking skills to prepare people to go out and be thriving adults. You can actually have a student go through college or go through high school or go through grade school. And let me finish. Thank you. And just be taught to the test. And so you literally, you know why I know? Because I had an experience. I will never forget. Right? I was a teacher. I will never forget. We were going to take our regents, and we were really wanting to make sure our scores. So we were teaching to the test. The same night, I went home and watched the episode on The Wire, and they taught the exact same thing because they were teaching to the test. We were not preparing my students.
What percentage of your colleagues, when you were a teacher, sucked? How many?
I think that I come from a family of educators.
Everybody
my
was great?
grandmother was an educator. My aunt was a superintendent. My sister is a teacher.
Answer the question.
I think teaching is one of the hardest professions.
I agree.
And I think when you wake up every day and you say, I am going to take care of other people's children and try and advance them.
You're not answering my question.
I don't think every teacher, no. Because I think that it is so easy.
Great.
I think it is so easy for people to be so disrespectful to teachers. It is a hard profession.
You're not answering the question.
In every single profession, there are people who are good and there are people who could be better.
Out of 10.
But the majority.
How many suck? How many out of 10?
All right, let me ask Van a question because let's see.
She don't want to answer that question because she know there's a lot of crappy teachers. I know a lot of people that got into other careers, couldn't cut it, and said, you know what, I'll just go be a teacher.
Let's say that, everybody agrees we're not where we need to be as a country. What's wrong with trying to do something completely different? What's wrong with not just continuing what we've been doing that hasn't been working?
I mean, for me, I think there's more investment that's needed. I think we need to invest into early Head Start. Yeah. I think one of the hugest indicators on how a kid is going to perform in school later on in their scholastic career is how early they get what they need. So I think there needs to be more investment into early Head Start, more investment into other things that deal with some of the outside factors that keep kids from excelling in the classroom.
And the point that you brought up is really good because I want to, go ahead. Scott.
Well, over the last 50 years in this country, the amount of money we spend on education has gone this way, but test scores have gone this way. It's not the money.
It's where,
I agree with Kevin a little bit tonight because what we're talking about is one, because of the simple fact that he's talking about creating more teachers. And so Kevin's going out on this limb and saying that we need to make sure that we're investing in these HBCUs, in these community colleges, in these technical colleges, to make sure that we're putting and investing and making sure that people actually go to school to come out with these degrees to be teachers. And so I applaud you for that. I also think it's really easy for people to pile on teachers.
Yes.
Jobs that other people wouldn't take for $30,000 a year, because teachers now have to not only go to work at your elementary school, but they work at Cracker Barrel too. Like they have other jobs.
Horrible.
It is horrible. They have roommates.
And they also need master's degrees.
Yes.
And advanced degrees. So these are not people just rolling
These
out
are
of high
underpaid
school.
people.
Does anyone believe in school choice at this table?
No.
I do. Why not?
The problem is that you have to make every school a good choice. And school choice works in metropolitan areas where you have things like transportation. But in the rural places, if you have 100 miles and you have 4 schools,
we trap a lot of urban kids in bad schools.
And the problem with that is that if you go to school choice, and I talk to Roland Martin and others about this all the time, you'll have something like white flight after Brown v. Board. But instead of white flight, you'll have the people who can't afford to leave that school will leave, and it will cause a drain at those schools.
I think we ought to give scholarships to the poorest kids to get them out of the worst schools as well.
I agree with Scott Jennings, 1,000% there. But the issue that none of them spoke on was the lack of strong nuclear families. That's the biggest issue that we have in our country. It's a direct correlation. Yes, we're spending way more money in our schools. Yes, test scores are coming down in drastic numbers. You know what else is also coming down? nuclear families. People are not being married. More children are being born out of wedlock. There is a direct correlation there. When you don't have children being raised in normal, functional, nuclear families, everything is sacrificed. Everything. And unfortunately, the children are the people that suffer the most. There needs to be an incentive to get people to not only get married, but have their children in these unions. It is extremely important. If we can incentivize that in some shape, way, form, or fashion, you will start to see these test scores. You will start to see these kids going through school and becoming productive citizens in society. Let's check this next clip out.
It's creating this really deep sense of fear. And by the way, economic research shows that when that sense of fear sets in, it takes a long time to go away. It takes a year, 2 years, sometimes more.
Yeah, Kevin, I mean, you understand that. The markets are speaking with one voice. They are saying thumbs down, don't like it. And the CEOs are being pretty straightforward. Jamie Dimon, a month ago, he said, or a month and a half ago, he said, if tariffs are inflationary, but it's good for national security, so be it. Get over it. Today he's saying, I don't think the American worker goes to work in the morning, changes what they're going to do because they read about tariffs, but I do think companies might, and uncertainty is not a good thing.
Okay, let's separate the market from the policy. So stock market's correct about every 18 months as much as 10 to 20%. We're right in the middle of that right now. It's actually healthy. I mean, it feels terrible when it's occurring, but corrections have been part of the market for 150 years. So let's get over that. Let's talk about the policy of tariffs. Tariffs in this situation are not long-term yet. Even Ludnick today said he's having the Premier of Ontario tomorrow morning for discussions to bring down the heat on car and electricity issues. The challenge with Canada, which we just talked about, is they have no leader. Trudeau was kicked out on Sunday night at midnight. They're going to have a new leader in 90 days. Ludnick himself said this morning, let's wait till the new person who's going to be prime minister is in place and start a pan-Canadian negotiation. Now, tariffs themselves, nobody understands. If you ask the average person walking down the street, what's a tariff, they have no idea. What Trump is trying to do is to reset the tariff schedules that were set in place after the Second World War in every single country, not just Canada, not just Mexico, but Germany and England and France and Switzerland and India. So it's very simple. Let's say we make sugar, as we do, and India makes sugar, and they put 110% tariff on our sugar going to India. Why don't we just reciprocate? So what happens in a trade war where tariffs are escalated is when both sides say to each other...
But I do want to distinguish between what you're talking about, reciprocal tariffs, which he's promised are
coming. That's coming April 2nd.
Yeah, right. He's promised are coming. And what has actually been happening now, which is that Trump claims that they're going to be massive across-the-board tariffs on two countries that we have a trade agreement with.
I know you don't like Trump's style.
No.
You haven't liked it for 12 years.
I don't want people to be confused, is what I'm saying, about what...
People were not going to be confused. He was actually explaining it in a way that actually could make sense to the regular common person that may not be familiar with what these tariffs are. And she cut him off because he was starting to make entirely too much sense.
We're talking about here. What the markets are reacting to right now is Trump saying 25% on Mexico and Canada, and then the next day saying, "Oh, never mind, 50% on steel and aluminum," and then on the next, and then 6 hours later, "Oh, never mind."
You know,
that's what they're reacting to.
Look, I don't think you can write off what is happening in the market right now as just a correction. One,
it is a correction.
Two, Americans may or may not understand tariffs, but you know what they understand? They were promised that egg prices and other prices were going to go down. And what they're watching in the market, which seems to be a reaction to tariffs, is their retirement funds disappear. And they're making it very clear that they hold one person accountable. In the poll numbers, Donald Trump. He won, and us Democrats lost because we didn't focus enough on the economy, and we didn't focus it in a way that was tangible and understandable to Americans.
Do you really think Americans are so dumb that they don't understand tariffs, that they don't understand that something's going to cost 25% more? Honestly, I think the person who doesn't understand tariffs is Donald Trump, who often says that it is the country that he's going to tariff that are going to pay those tariffs, when we all know it is us,
like Mexico was going to build the wall,
going to end up paying the tariffs.
Actually, people don't understand.
So in 1991, we had a $30 billion trade deficit. Fast forward to 2022, $950 billion. That's a 3,000+% increase. No one said anything about the price of goods going up, or at least acknowledged the price of goods, except for people on my side, going up over the past 4 years. And the point was made that it takes Americans about a year or two to get over the pain. Well, I guess it's going to take an additional 4 or 8 years for them to get over the previous 4 years. I think the president is right to attempt a reset as it pertains to our trade. I spent, an hour on my way up here looking at all these old articles coming out of liberal outlets over the past 10, 15, 20 years, talking about the disaster free trade has had on middle-class America, how it's destroyed manufacturing in this country, how once upon a time the Rust Belt was thriving, now it's in decay. You can't blame that on Donald Trump for wanting to focus and put a microscope and saying, wait a minute here, we have left a significant percent of our fellow Americans behind. Let's fix that.
I want to respond to this because, it's a little more nuanced. I've written some of those articles, and I've written 3 books, actually, about the problems with the neoliberal trading system. But there is a difference between doing what Trump 1 did, which is, raising the scrim on the global trading relationship, particularly between the U.S. and China, and saying, there's a problem, we have to rebalance. If you're going to do that, you need to have your allies with you. And that's what Biden did. He came in and said, we're going to keep some of those tariffs. Yes, he did. And I'll tell you, give me a minute.
Yeah,
I'll explain.
please.
He came in and he said, we're going to keep some of those tariffs in place, but we're also going to have an industrial strategy where we start working with allies to try and figure out how to rebuild, parts of the manufacturing industry. We're trying to retrain workers.
How effective was the strategy?
The chips industry, for starters, in 18 months.
Looking at the economy over 4 years, it was a disaster.
Let me just, please. In 18 months, the Biden administration brought back semiconductors, which hadn't been in this country in 50 years. That's no small thing. Back to what Trump's doing this time. I'm not against tariffs, but if you're going to rebuild industry, you need to work with allies. You need that shared demand. And right now, by trying to do it all at once, by trying to reset everything and all alone, I don't think you're going to be able to get to that end game of rebuilding industry. I really don't. You need Canada, for example.
You referenced the Chips and Science Act. A total waste of money. I, as a private investor, would never give Intel a dime. It's being sold for car parts right now. Crappy management. I was forced to pay as a taxpayer to a really crappy company.
Virtually anybody who is involved in
that's ludicrous.
Horrible bill. Horrible bill.
Nobody says that.
Hey, I believe Kevin O'Leary over this lady. Seriously.
I take your point.
I'm saying it right now because it's a horrible bill, and I hope it gets shut down.
I'll let Rana respond to this because, look, I've talked to people who are in the defense industry, people who are in the technology industry. No one says that about chips and science.
I'm saying it right now.
Here's what they do say.
No one else says it.
Here's what they do say. They say it could have gone even further. That it's a
more money to
start.
Intel? Why the private sector won't invest in it?
But they say it could have gone even further.
Was it
Republicans, by the way, voted for it.
Was it a good idea for anybody, for the U.S., for China, for Europe, to have 92% of semiconductors made in Taiwan? No, it wasn't. But private industry was not bringing that back.
You can change the tax policy to get.
The government did that.
But Ron,
okay?
Never pick companies.
I take that point. I actually don't disagree. You've even had companies as of this year saying that they're going to invest further in chip development within the U.S. Correct. So I don't disagree with that. Again, the premise of the argument that I'm making here, though, that's one particular sector. We're still behind significantly as it pertains to manufacturing writ large. And to put a spotlight and focus on that to at least return some of that back to the United States,
I'll tell you what's
I don't
not
think
going
it's
to help
necessarily a bad thing.
manufacturing. If Canada starts making the factories in the upper
They
Midwest
rely more on
pay
us than
spot
we do on them.
prices for energy.
Canada relies more on the
because
U.S.
Trump
than the
is
U.S.
not
relies on
working
Canada.
with allies that it's such low-hanging fruit. China's laughing all the way to the bank on this, by the way. They're just looking out.
Because last time I looked at their economic condition, it doesn't look very great. You should know that.
You know what they
It isn't. And China is not laughing it all the way to the bank. They're not. China right now is on the daggone verge of collapse in every way possible. They don't have people. They don't have their replacement is borderline. It's almost negative right now. They're not as strong as this lady tries to make it out to be. And the Biden-Harris administration, it's not as good as she tried to make it out to be. And Kevin O'Leary is absolutely right. And if she would have allowed him to continue down, his thought process as to what's going on with these tariffs, where, hey, we're just matching it. We're still dealing with trade agreements from after World War II. And we all understand why that was in place, because The damage was done over in Europe and in those nations over there. So we offered them the ability to sell their goods over here at basically little to nothing from a tariff perspective to help them rebuild their nation. Okay, they're rebuilt now. It's time to revamp those deals. And when India has 100+% tax on us, if you don't do something about that, we need to reciprocate that same tax. No different than what's going on in Canada, what's going on in Mexico, no different than what's going on in any other country in Europe right now. We're being robbed. We're being pillaged right now. And it seems like people like this lady and others on the left are absolutely okay with it. President Trump is talking about evening the daggone playing field when it comes to these tariffs and also increasing income in our country, increasing revenue through these tariffs, opposed to continuing to raise the tax on the American people. It sounds like a great idea to me. And anytime you do something that's drastically different, there's going to be a little pain involved. No different than, if you start trying to lift weights or you want to lose weight, there's a little bit of pain early on in the process that you are going to have to deal with. That just is what it is. And that's what we're going through right now. And as long as the people in Congress get the heck out the way and get on board, we're going to be fine. And we'll be looking at this a year from now, 2 years from now, and saying, you know what? It was the right decision. It was the right decision. But I want to hear from you guys in the comment section. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, turn the notifications on so you never miss an upload. Click that all button. If you'd like to go the extra mile and support the channel, join the ARP family, or you can buy your man a coffee. Link in the description box below. Keep God first in your life. Stay prayed up. We'll catch up with you all next time. Peace.
Vibes so raw, can't hide the truth. Words so sharp.